There is a moment in every woman's life when she realizes that something feels off. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle, a quiet discomfort, a sense that no matter how much she gives, no matter how much she does, something inside still feels empty. This moment doesn't come to break her. It comes to wake her up. And if you've felt that lately, you're not alone. What if this discomfort wasn't a sign that you're lost, but an invitation to finally come back to yourself? Louise Hay believed that the most powerful shift a person could make was to begin honoring their own needs, to choose themselves, to focus on what's happening inside, rather than being consumed by everything outside. But most of us were not raised to do that. We were taught to serve, to prove, to earn love through effort. And over time, we forget that we are already worthy, already enough, just by being. When you focus on everyone else, you slowly lose sight of your center. You say yes when you mean no. You smile when you're hurting. You make yourself small to keep the peace. And you tell yourself that this is normal, that this is love, but it's not. True love, the kind that nourishes and heals, begins when you decide to be honest with yourself. When you stop abandoning your own needs in the name of being good. This is not about becoming selfish, it's about becoming whole. When you focus on yourself with compassion, not criticism, something shifts. You begin to feel again. You begin to remember who you are. And from that place, you start to live differently. You choose with more clarity. You speak with more truth. You walk with more ease. What if today you made a decision not to fix everything, but to pause, to listen, to be with yourself without judgment? That is how it begins. Not with a plan or a goal, but with presence. A gentle return to your own breath, your own heart, your own truth. This is what Louise meant when she said the power is within you. It was never lost. It was only waiting for your attention. And here is a truth that many forget. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot give love that you deny yourself. The more you nourish your inner world, the more naturally your outer life begins to reflect peace, trust, and joy. It doesn't happen all at once, but it begins the moment you turn inward and listen. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly gave yourself that attention? Not as a reward, not as an afterthought, but as a sacred priority. If this message speaks to you, take a moment to reflect. And if you feel like it, share in the comments what part of you is asking to be seen again. Because this is just the beginning. You're not falling apart. You're finally coming home. Focusing on yourself is not about shutting out the world. It's about finding your place within it. When everything outside feels loud and overwhelming, your inner world becomes your anchor. But so many women have been conditioned to believe that their worth is tied to what they do for others. They've been praised for being selfless, admired for being strong, and applauded for putting everyone else first. Over time, that praise becomes a trap, because the more you live for others, the more invisible you become to yourself. Louise Hay often reminded us that the relationship we have with ourselves sets the tone for every other relationship in our lives. If we are constantly abandoning ourselves, we teach the world to do the same. If we don't respect our own boundaries, we attract situations that cross them. And if we don't believe we deserve care, kindness, and rest, we unconsciously push those things away. Take a moment to think about how often you check in with yourself. When you wake, are your first thoughts about what needs to be done or how you feel? When you're tired, do you push through or allow yourself to pause? When you're hurt, do you silence it or acknowledge it? These tiny moments create a pattern, a code, one that either leads to burnout or to inner peace. You were not born to be everything to everyone. You were born to be whole. And when you start focusing on what makes you feel alive, what brings you clarity, and what helps you feel safe in your own presence, the world begins to respond differently. It's not magic, it's alignment. You show up rooted, not reactive. You speak from truth, not fear. And you start making choices that honor who you truly are. Some people will not understand your shift. They may call it selfish or distant. But that says more about their expectations than your reality. Choosing yourself is not a rejection of others. It's a return to balance, because when your needs are met, your love becomes deeper, not smaller. Your presence becomes more nourishing, not less available. There's a kind of power that comes when a woman stops apologizing for needing space, for feeling deeply, for saying no. That power is quiet, but it transforms everything. It allows her to walk into a room and not seek validation. It allows her to rest without guilt. And it allows her to offer love without resentment, because it's coming from a full place. Your focus is your energy. Where it goes, your life follows. If you've been feeling scattered or drained, maybe it's time to ask yourself where your attention has been living. And more importantly, if it's been living in places that no longer feed you, you are allowed to change the way you show up. You are allowed to choose differently. Because when you do, everything around you begins to shift in response. And that is where the healing begins. The hardest part about shifting your focus inward is that it often brings up what you've spent years avoiding. Silence has a way of revealing what busyness hides. When you stop running, the feelings you've been pushing away rise to the surface. The old wounds, the unspoken disappointments, the habits of self-betrayal. It can feel like too much, but this is not a breakdown. It's a breakthrough. And Louise Hay taught us that the only way to truly heal is to face what we fear with love, not judgment. Many women avoid focusing on themselves because deep down, they're afraid of what they might find. Maybe there's a voice inside that says they're not enough. Maybe there's shame that has never been spoken. Or maybe there's grief from all the times they put their own needs last. But none of these emotions are here to punish you. They're here to guide you. They are signals, not stop signs. Each one is asking to be heard, not hidden. When you create space to listen without trying to fix or control, something shifts. You begin to hear the truth beneath the noise. You realize that the inner critic isn't your enemy. It's a scared part of you that was never taught how to feel safe. And the only way to change that voice is to meet it with compassion. Not with more shame, not with more silence. Louise would often say, "You've been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens." That's not just a beautiful affirmation. It's a way of life. Approval isn't about perfection. It's about presence. It's about seeing yourself clearly and still choosing kindness. The journey inward can be messy. Some days you'll feel strong and grounded. Other days you'll feel lost and unsure. That's okay. Healing is not a straight line. It's a spiral. You revisit old stories from a new place, and each time you gain a little more wisdom, a little more clarity, a little more courage to choose again. When you feel like you're regressing, remember this: you're not going backward, you're moving deeper. And with each layer you uncover, you create more space for peace, more room for joy, more freedom to just be. So don't rush the process. Let it be what it needs to be. Give yourself permission to feel what you feel without labeling it as wrong. This is the essence of self-care. Not the bubble baths or the affirmations alone, but the decision to stay with yourself even when it's hard. Even in your quiet moments, you are growing. Even when no one sees your progress, your soul feels it. Every time you offer yourself grace, you heal something old. And in that healing, you begin to trust yourself again. Right now, in this moment, you are already doing the work. Simply by being present, simply by being willing to look within, and that is enough. When you begin to focus on yourself, you will likely encounter resistance, not just from the outside, but from within. There is a part of you that has grown used to neglecting your own needs, a part that believes care must be earned through sacrifice. This is where many give up. They start the journey of self-discovery with excitement, only to feel guilt when they rest or shame when they set a boundary. But this resistance is not a sign to stop. It's a signal that you are changing a deep, unconscious pattern. Louise Hay spoke often about the power of affirmations, not as magic words, but as tools to rewire the mind. When you repeat, "I am worthy of love," "I am enough," you are not lying to yourself. You are teaching your nervous system a new language, one that was likely never spoken in your home, one that may still feel unfamiliar, even after years of personal growth. But change does not require perfection. It requires commitment. And every time you choose to return to yourself instead of running away, you are committing to that change. You may not see results immediately, but trust that the inner shifts are happening. Just like a plant grows in silence before it breaks the surface, your healing is unfolding in ways you may not yet understand. There will be days when focusing on yourself feels selfish, especially if you are surrounded by people who benefited from your self-abandonment. That is normal. You are not wrong for choosing peace. You are not unkind for choosing rest. You are simply remembering who you were before the world taught you to forget. This journey is not about becoming someone new. It's about coming home to who you've always been. And along the way, you may discover layers of anger, sadness, or fear. Don't turn away from them. These feelings are not mistakes, they are messages. Each one is asking to be acknowledged, not suppressed. Sometimes, healing looks like taking a deep breath before responding. Other times, it looks like canceling a plan without guilt, or saying yes to something just because it brings you joy. These are the moments that matter. Not the big breakthroughs, but the quiet choices made daily in favor of self-honor. There is power in choosing softness, power in choosing rest, power in choosing your own voice after years of silencing it for others. That kind of power grows slowly but deeply, and it changes everything. So here is a gentle reminder. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have needs. And you are allowed to prioritize yourself, even if no one else understands it yet. Your life is not a performance. It is a reflection of your inner world. And when that world is cared for, everything outside begins to shift. If you felt this shift already, even in small ways, I'd love to hear what changed for you. Sometimes sharing our experience helps others feel less alone. And it reminds us that we are all learning how to come home to ourselves. One of the most transformative lessons Louise Hay ever taught was the importance of self-talk. Not the words we say out loud, but the ones we whisper to ourselves in the quiet. These inner conversations shape everything. They influence how we respond to challenges, how we treat our bodies, and how we relate to others. Yet many women grow up with a voice inside that is not kind, a voice that criticizes every mistake, questions every decision, and doubts every step. That voice is not your truth. It's a pattern, and patterns can be changed. Think about how often you've apologized just for existing, for taking too long, for asking for help, for needing rest. These apologies are not signs of politeness. They're symptoms of forgetting your worth. You don't need to apologize for being human. You don't need to earn your place by shrinking yourself. Louise believed that changing the way we speak to ourselves could change our entire lives. But this isn't just about repeating affirmations. It's about noticing the story behind the words. When you say, "I'm not good enough," what are you really afraid of? When you think, "I can't do this," whose voice are you echoing? The moment you begin to question those stories is the moment you start to reclaim your power. Self-talk is a habit, and like any habit, it takes awareness to shift. You may catch yourself in the middle of a harsh thought and choose to pause, to breathe, to say, "Wait, I don't have to speak to myself this way anymore." That moment is powerful. It breaks the cycle. And with time, those small interruptions create a new voice, a voice that is gentle, encouraging, and wise. You are not weak for needing kindness. You are not less valuable when you struggle. You are not behind just because your healing takes time. These are truths you can remind yourself of daily, and even if you don't believe them yet, speak them anyway. Speak them like you would to a child who's trying their best. Speak them like you would to someone you love. That love you offer others is the same love you deserve from yourself. The relationship you have with yourself sets the foundation for every other part of your life. And when that foundation is built on compassion instead of criticism, everything changes. You begin to ask for what you need without guilt. You begin to say no without explaining. You begin to feel safe in your own presence. That is the kind of safety no one can take away from you. This process isn't about doing it perfectly. It's about doing it consistently. It's about choosing to try again, even when old thoughts return. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are simply learning how to be with yourself in a new way, a way that honors your heart, a way that forgives your past, a way that welcomes every part of who you are. There's a moment in every healing journey where you realize that the way others treat you is often a reflection of how you treat yourself. This isn't about blame, it's about awareness. It's about seeing how your inner world creates your outer experiences. Louise Hay taught that our relationships are mirrors, and sometimes the people who challenge us the most are showing us where we've forgotten our worth. This insight can be painful, but it's also empowering, because once you see the pattern, you can change it. Take a moment to think about the people in your life, the ones who drain you, the ones who ignore your boundaries, the ones who make you question your value. Then ask yourself gently, where am I doing this to myself? Do you dismiss your own needs? Do you push through exhaustion? Do you silence your voice to keep the peace? These habits often start in childhood and become so familiar that we no longer question them. But questioning is the beginning of change. Louise believed that healing begins when we become willing to look with honesty and compassion. This isn't about judging yourself. It's about noticing. And once you notice, you can choose again. You can choose to speak kindly, to rest when you're tired, to say no when something doesn't feel right. These small acts are not selfish. They are sacred. They tell your nervous system, I am safe, I matter, I belong to myself. It's easy to wait for others to treat us better before we believe we deserve it. But the real shift happens when you begin treating yourself the way you want to be treated, with care, with respect, with softness. And what you'll find is that the world begins to mirror that back to you. Not instantly, but steadily. And sometimes, this shift brings endings. Certain relationships may fade. Certain habits may no longer fit. But what remains is stronger, more aligned, and more true. You may be surprised at how powerful this inner alignment becomes. You stop seeking validation from people who never really saw you. You stop explaining your worth to those who didn't value it. Instead, you begin to move with quiet confidence. You begin to build a life that reflects your inner peace, not your inner chaos. Louise often reminded us that we don't need permission to change. We don't need approval to grow. We only need willingness. The willingness to look inward. The willingness to choose differently. The willingness to believe that we are already enough, even while we grow. And if this reflection stirred something in you, I encourage you to sit with it. No need to fix it all at once. Just notice. Let the awareness be enough for today. Awareness is the beginning of every transformation. Focusing on yourself is not about isolation. It's about connection. But not the kind of connection that depends on approval or the need to be chosen. It's the deep connection that begins when you choose yourself fully and without apology. Louise Hay often spoke of the importance of returning home to the self. She believed that the most powerful healing happens when we stop searching outside and start nurturing the relationship within. When that relationship is rooted in love, everything else in life begins to align more naturally. But this alignment doesn't always come with ease. In fact, there is usually a point when the discomfort feels like too much. A moment where you wonder if all the effort is even worth it. Maybe you've been there. Maybe you've tried to change, to set boundaries, to heal, and still felt stuck in the same cycles. This is where many give up, not because they're weak, but because no one taught them what to expect when old patterns begin to fall apart. Louise called this moment the space in between. It's the place between the old life that no longer fits and the new one that hasn't fully arrived. It can feel empty, uncertain, even lonely. But it's also sacred, because in this space, you are building something real. You are not repeating the past. You are choosing again. And every choice, no matter how small, matters. There's power in saying no to what drains you. There's power in resting without guilt. Well, there's power in speaking your truth, even if your voice trembles. These are the moments where your new life is being born, not in the grand declarations, but in the quiet, consistent choices that say, I choose me. You may not see the results immediately, but with each choice, you're planting seeds of a life that reflects your true values. You don't need to have it all figured out to be on the right path. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love. You are allowed to be a work in progress and still love yourself through it. That is the heart of Louise's message. That healing is not about fixing what's broken, but about remembering what has always been whole within you. The self that existed before the doubt. The self that knew how to trust. And if this message has touched something inside you, I'd love to know what part of your journey you're in right now. What truth are you learning to speak? What habit are you releasing? What version of yourself are you beginning to trust? Share your experience in the comments, not just for yourself, but because your words might be the exact reminder someone else needs to hear today. You are not alone in this journey. You are not behind. You are not late. You are exactly where you need to be, becoming the person you were always meant to be. There comes a time when focusing on yourself no longer feels like a radical act. It begins to feel like peace, like safety, like coming home after a long, exhausting journey. That's what Louise Hay envisioned when she taught the power of self-love. Not just a warm idea, but a way of living, a way of moving through the world with intention, with softness, and with strength. A way of choosing every day to show up for yourself, no matter what the world expects. At this point in your journey, you may have noticed small shifts, and maybe you breathe deeper. Maybe you say no without guilt. Maybe you no longer over-explain your choices to people who don't truly listen. These are not small things. These are signs that your inner world is becoming stronger than the noise outside of you. And when that happens, everything starts to align in a way that once felt impossible. You may still have hard days. You may still hear the old voice telling you that you're too much or not enough. That's normal. Healing is not about never hearing that voice again. It's about learning not to believe it. Louise reminded us that our thoughts are just thoughts. They are not facts. They are habits. And you have the power to create new ones. One kind thought at a time. One boundary at a time. One breath at a time. There's a quiet kind of courage in choosing yourself again and again. It's not loud. It's not always visible. But it's there, in the way you get up each morning and decide to try again. In the way you show up for your own heart, even when no one else understands. That's the kind of courage that builds a life of meaning. If you take nothing else from this message, let it be this: you are allowed to rest. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to want more. You are allowed to say yes to yourself without asking for permission. This is your life, your path, your one chance to live with honesty, with presence, and with love. And maybe something in this video opened a door inside you. Maybe it reminded you of who you were before you learned to doubt yourself. If that's true, I hope you'll carry that feeling forward. Let it guide your choices. Let it shape the way you speak to yourself. Let it become the new foundation you build your life on. If this message spoke to your heart, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what shifted for you, what you're choosing to do differently. And if this journey feels right to you, I invite you to subscribe and stay with us. Together, we're creating something powerful, a community rooted in love, honesty, and real transformation. Because you are the foundation, and when you focus on yourself with love, everything else will begin to fall into place.